My skin started to itch again last week. Not all over, just in one spot. My left shoulder, right on top of the bone. At first I thought it was an insect bite, or maybe an old sunburn flaring up. But when I looked in the mirror, I saw it was back. That mark. It's hard to describe unless you've seen it. It's not quite a scar, not quite a tattoo. It looks like a burn, but the skin isn't raised or peeling. Just warped somehow, like someone pressed a brand into me, but with memory instead of fire. It's shaped like a spiral, but irregular, jagged, with sharp teeth branching from its curve. And no matter what angle I turn, it always looks like it's watching me. I haven't seen it in years. I thought it had faded. Hell, I thought I'd imagined it. But it came back, out of nowhere, and it burns. Like a warning, like it wants me to remember. So here I am, talking to you, whoever you are. Maybe you found this recording on a dead man's phone, or maybe someone forwarded it to you, thinking it was one of those creepy internet things people share late at night. Doesn't matter. What matters is that you listen. Not because I think you'll believe me, but because something is happening again, and I need to drag the truth into the light before it disappears with me. I've never told anyone the full story. I tried once, years ago, but the words sounded ridiculous. They tasted like fever dreams. I sounded insane even to myself. But after seeing the mark again, after hearing what I heard last night, I know I can't stay quiet. You see, last night, while I was brushing my teeth, I heard her. A whisper. Not outside, not in the hallway. Inside the mirror. I froze, the toothbrush still buzzing in my mouth, foam dripping down my chin. Her voice was faint, just a hiss, a sound like salt hitting flame. But I know what she said. You came back. I was 29 when it happened. Working freelance, hopping between countries, chasing old trails and older languages for a travel guide company that never paid enough but gave me freedom. That year they sent me to northern Spain, somewhere along the forgotten parts of Galicia near the Atlantic cliffs. They wanted articles on abandoned pilgrimage routes and their historical significance, something poetic for tourists who like to pretend they were seekers of ancient wisdom. I didn't care. I liked the solitude. They gave me a folder with old maps and names that didn't exist on Google. The route was meant to lead me to several tiny, crumbling villages nestled in the cliffs. Most were empty. A few had people who barely spoke. But there was one place they insisted I visit. A town called Os Brancos. Not on any modern map, only marked in faded ink on a parchment tucked in the bottom of the folder. When I asked about it, my contact shrugged. Local myth. Some say it's cursed, others say it vanished after the war. Good story material, right? I should have walked away right then. The mark started to burn that night. Not sharp, not like fire. More like heat building inside my bones. I stood in front of the mirror, staring at it. I hadn't seen it in years. I thought maybe I'd just gotten sunburned or brushed against something toxic on the trail. But then came the dreams. The dreams I hadn't had since I left that place. Salt. Everywhere. In my eyes, my mouth, beneath my nails. A taste that never left. A dryness that scraped the back of my throat. And her. A woman standing at the edge of a cliff, cloaked in something that shimmered and cracked like dried salt, her face hidden, her arms too long, and her voice. Not a voice, a resonance, like something echoing through water. I haven't slept since then. I'd barely eat. The light in my apartment flickers even though I change the bulbs. I avoid mirrors, but it doesn't matter. I see her in windows now. I hear her voice when the kettle whistles. This is why I have to tell the story, even if it kills me, even if you think I'm mad, because something followed me back. Or maybe I never left.
The first time I saw Os Brancos, it didn't look real. I'd been driving for hours on a winding coastal road that narrowed until it became more gravel than asphalt. The rental car's GPS gave up long before that, blinking uselessly like it knew better than to follow me where I was going. The trees on either side grew denser, leaning over the road like they were trying to hide something behind their branches. And the fog. God, the fog just sat there, thick and unmoving, like the air itself was holding its breath. But then, it appeared. The trees parted just enough to show a sliver of gray stone buildings tucked between cliffs. There was no signpost, no welcome to Os Brancos, just an old stone archway at the edge of a dirt path, its top cracked in the middle like it had been struck by lightning. On the arch, carved so faintly I almost missed it, was a single word: Volveo. I didn't speak Galician, but later I learned it meant returned. That should have been enough to turn me around. The village was quiet, too quiet. No cars, no power lines, no dogs barking or birds chirping. The only sound was the wind blowing in off the Atlantic, carrying the distant crash of waves and the smell of sea salt, and something else, something sour like old milk or forgotten meat. The buildings were made of gray stone, covered in moss and ivy. Most had no doors, just open frames that yawned like mouths. Some windows were boarded shut. Others were just holes, staring blankly. I walked through the center of the village, notebook in hand, expecting someone, anyone, to stop me. But I saw no one, just the hint of movement behind a curtain here, a shadow in a window there, always gone when I turned to look. I finally found a house with a red cloth hanging in the doorway, fluttering gently in the wind. A sign someone was still there. An elderly woman opened the door before I could knock. Her eyes were pale gray, almost white, like cloudy glass. She stared at me a long moment, then stepped aside. "You're the one who came from the Salt Road," she said in accented Spanish. I didn't know what that meant, but I was too tired to argue. Her name was Doña Anja. She lived alone in a stone house near the cliff's edge. Inside, it smelled like herbs and vinegar. Everything was old: furniture, books, even the air. But it was clean, kept with care. She spoke slowly, as if weighing every word. I told her I was writing about forgotten pilgrimage routes and that I'd come to document any stories or traditions. She listened politely, nodded once, and said, "There are stories here, but stories are like stones in the sea. You never know which ones the tide will drag back." Cryptic, sure, but I'd interviewed dozens of old villagers across Europe. They all liked to talk in riddles. It made them feel important. She let me stay in a back room for the night, said the inn had closed long ago. I didn't argue. The room was small and smelled faintly of smoke and lavender. The bed was too short for me, and the window had no curtain, just a clear view of the ocean and the cliffs beyond. That night I dreamed again. I was walking through a salt flat. My feet cracked the surface with every step. The air stung my eyes. Ahead of me stood a woman, her face hidden by a veil of crystals. When I reached out to touch her, she turned, and her face was gone. The next day, I tried to map the village. It didn't make sense. The streets twisted in ways they shouldn't. I'd turn a corner and find myself back where I started. Some alleys ended in blank stone walls, but when I turned back, the path behind me had changed. I told myself I was just tired, jet-lagged, disoriented. I asked Doña Anja about it over dinner. She stirred her spoon slowly, not looking at me. The village shifts when it wants to, when she wants it to. Who? I asked, already guessing. Her eyes met mine. For the first time, something sharp flickered in them. She is the caminante, she said, the one who walks the salt. Then she looked back at her bowl and said nothing more. Later that night I explored alone. I wanted photos, notes, something to prove this place existed. That's when I met the old man. He sat on a broken bench near the church ruins, staring at the sea. His clothes were layered and torn. His beard was salt white, his skin like old leather. He didn't look at me when he spoke. You shouldn't have come. She remembers. I asked who she was. He spit in the dirt. She was a mother once, a wife, a pilgrim. She walked the world looking for something she lost. But when she reached this place, there was nothing left to find. So she stayed and waited. For what? He turned then, and his eyes were bloodshot and furious. For you. I didn't sleep well that night. I woke to the sound of dripping water, except it wasn't raining. I followed the noise down the hallway to the kitchen. There, on the table, sat a bowl filled with seawater. Floating in it was a small clump of white fabric. It was my undershirt from the night before, the one I'd left in my backpack. I hadn't told anyone where I put it. No one should have touched it. I reached into the bowl and pulled it out. It was soaked and coated with a thin layer of fine, crystalline salt. My skin burned when I touched it. I dropped it and turned around, and for a split second, in the reflection of the kitchen window, I saw a figure standing just behind me.
I didn't tell Doña Angsa what happened that night. I couldn't explain it to myself, let alone put it into words for someone else. I just sat at her table the next morning, eyes raw, body aching, pretending everything was normal. She served tea and bread, her movements calm, deliberate, like nothing had changed. But something had changed. Something had started. After breakfast, I went to retrieve my backpack from the corner of the room where I'd left it the day before, except it wasn't there. I found it inside the hallway closet, zipped up, neatly placed on the top shelf. I hadn't touched that closet. I hadn't even opened it. Inside the backpack, everything looked the same, but my journal was missing. I found it hours later, tucked beneath a pillow in the room I was sleeping in. A single page had been torn out. And on that page, in handwriting that wasn't mine, was a sentence written over and over. She waits where the salt does not settle. That day, I wandered the village with my camera, trying to get a grip on something, anything that felt grounded. Reality had begun to feel slippery, like a wet rock underfoot. I thought if I just documented things, took photos, made maps, I could piece it all together later, make sense of it. But the photos didn't help. When I checked the shots I'd taken on my DSLR, many were warped, just slightly. Some were foggy when there was no fog. In others, buildings appeared at odd angles as if they'd shifted mid-shot. But worst of all were the people, or rather, the figures. There were some I didn't remember seeing when I took the photo, just shadows at the edge of the frame, sometimes tall, sometimes crouched low. And in one photo, at the end of a cobbled street, there was a woman in a long dress, facing away from the camera. When I looked again, she was gone. I deleted it. I wish I hadn't. That night, I set a trap. Not a real one, nothing physical, just a test. I placed my journal on the table in the kitchen, then sprinkled flour across the floor leading up to it. I left the room and waited, lights off, with the door cracked open. I waited for over an hour. Nothing. Then a sound, a soft thump. Then the faintest dragging noise, like fabric brushing the floor. It was slow, so slow, like something trying not to be heard. I held my breath, listened. The journal moved. Not much, just an inch, then another. I wanted to run, but I couldn't move. My body was frozen in that narrow gap of darkness, watching something unseen touch my world. I never saw what did it. I never heard footsteps. But the flower was disturbed, as if something passed through it, brushing it aside without ever quite stepping in. I didn't sleep that night either. The dreams worsened. Now I was in the village, but different. The buildings were decayed to rubble. The sea was still, but wrong, like it had stopped moving. Salt coated everything, the trees, the stones, even the air. When I breathed, it grated down my throat. And she was always there, never speaking, just watching. Her veil was no longer full. It cracked, revealing something behind it. A mouth, not a human one, too wide, too deep. A hole, lined with sharp, salt-encrusted teeth. Every time I woke up, my throat was dry, as if I'd been screaming, but I never remembered hearing myself. On the third night, I woke up with my hand bleeding. 4 small cuts on my palm, clean, straight, like I'd been marked. I didn't even realize I was clutching something until I uncurled my fingers. It was a small rock covered in salt. I hadn't brought it there. The paranoia kicked in hard. I stopped going outside. I locked the door, not that I believed locks would help. I tried to call someone, anyone. My phone didn't work. No signal, no internet, not even GPS. My laptop refused to turn on. My watch showed the wrong time and reset itself every time I blinked. I started talking to myself out loud just to hear a human voice. That's when the whispering began. Not in the house, in the walls. It came at night, faint at first, just little syllables like someone muttering in a language I almost recognized. Then clearer, louder. She walked until her feet were bones. She gave her name to the wind. She sees you now. I tried to tell myself it was the wind, or maybe water pipes, but there were no pipes in that old stone house, and the wind didn't repeat words in a woman's voice. On the 5th night, I found the photograph, tucked under my door. It was a Polaroid, aged, curling at the corners. It showed a man standing on a cliff, looking out at the sea. The man was me. I don't own a Polaroid camera, On the back, written in the same foreign handwriting as before, "You already left once. She remembers." I tried to leave. I packed everything in 15 minutes, threw my bag over my shoulder, and stormed out of the house. The fog was thick again, but I didn't care. I followed the road I came in on. I walked for hours. No turns, no forks, just one winding path. Eventually, I saw the arch again. Relief hit me like a wave, until I passed under it and found myself back in the village square. I had walked in a circle, or the road had lied. I sat on the cracked stones and wept like a child. Later, back in my room, I noticed something else. My reflection. In the mirror, I wasn't blinking when I blinked. The delay was slight, maybe half a second, but it was there. I lifted my hand slowly, and in the mirror, the hand lifted too late. Not a trick of the eye, not exhaustion. It was something else. And behind my shoulder, only for a moment, there was movement, a shimmer. I didn't turn around.
I began sleeping with the lights on. Not that it helped. Darkness wasn't the problem. It was what came through, regardless of light, time, or even whether my eyes were open. The fog seeped through cracks in the window and under the door, like it had a mind of its own. And in that fog, there was always a shape. Sometimes tall, sometimes hunched, but always her. One night, I woke up, not because I heard anything, but because it was too quiet. No wind, no sea, no whispering. Only the sound of her breathing. Not mine, hers. It came from right outside my window, wet, shallow, steady, like gills trying to learn lungs. I sat frozen in bed, too afraid to even breathe. Then I saw the silhouette, a tall figure standing at the edge of the fog, just beyond the reach of the porch light. Long arms, veiled head. She didn't move, just stood there, breathing. Then she lifted her arm, slowly, and pointed. Not at the house, at me. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. At dawn, I searched outside, half expecting footprints, but there were none, just salt in the grass. The locals still wouldn't speak to me, not directly, but I noticed more of them watching me now, always from windows, never face to face. One old man dropped something in front of my doorstep before rushing away. It was a fish jawbone, cracked in half. Tied around it was a strip of red cloth. No note, no explanation. I took it to the only place that felt remotely normal, the pub. The bartender, a woman in her 60s with hands like driftwood, didn't say much at first. But when I showed her the jawbone, her eyes darkened. "Who gave you this?" she asked. "I don't know," I replied. "Some man. He didn't speak." She looked at the door, then back at me. "You should burn it." "Why?" "Because it's a warning." "Against what?" Her lips thinned. "Not what. Who?" I leaned in. "The woman in the fog?" The bartender paled. "You've seen her?" When I nodded, she made the sign of the cross, but with her left hand. "No one talks about her. She doesn't like being remembered." A group of fishermen at the bar went silent when they overheard.
One of them muttered something in that same foreign dialect I'd seen in the letter. The bartender snapped back in English. "He's already seen her. Talking won't make it worse." The man glared at me. "You should leave before she asks for more." More of what? But they didn't answer. Only one of them, a man with milky eyes and missing fingers, mumbled something before leaving. "She likes to collect the ones who return." That night, I locked every door and window. I even pushed a dresser in front of the front door like that would stop her. I kept the fish jawbone on the table, half burned, not sure if destroying it would make things worse or better. Sleep came in short, choppy bursts. At 2:37 a.m., I woke up to the smell of seawater. The fog had seeped in again. Not just outside this time, inside. I could see it curling through the hallway, rising up the stairs, clinging to the walls. My ears rang with silence, broken only by the slow creaking of wood, as if the whole house was breathing. Then I heard the dripping. Drip, drip, drip. From the upstairs bathroom. I grabbed my flashlight, hands trembling, and stepped toward the stairs. The fog was thick enough to smear the beam of light. Every step up felt like wading into a lake. I pushed the bathroom door open slowly. It was empty, except for the mirror. Something had been written in the condensation. "You came back." I ran, down the stairs, out the door, into the foggy night, barefoot, shirtless, heart beating like a war drum. But when I reached the beach, I stopped cold. There she was, standing on the water. Not in it, on it, like the ocean had frozen just beneath her feet. The fog parted around her like it feared to touch her. I could finally see her face, or what was left of it. Hollow eyes, seaweed for hair, lips like torn gills stitched together. And she smiled. I turned and sprinted back to the house, slipping in the wet grass. My bare feet bled over shells and gravel, but I didn't stop. I slammed the door behind me, locking it, pushing furniture against it, stacking chairs, anything I could grab. Then the knocking started. Not at the front door, at the upstairs window. In the morning, everything was normal again. No fog, no dripping, no writing. But I knew what I'd seen. The only proof was the dried blood on my feet and a faint fish smell in the hall. And then, when I looked at my phone, I saw something that nearly made me vomit. A video. 10 seconds, time-stamped 3:04 a.m. It was from my phone's camera. I hadn't taken it. The video showed my bedroom door slowly creaking open, and someone stepping in from the fog. From that day forward, I stopped sleeping in the house. I stayed in my car, parked at the edge of town, engine ready. I kept the video. I even showed it to a local police officer, but the moment he saw it, he turned pale and said, "You should delete that." Why? Because if she knows you kept it, she might decide to stay. For the first time in my life, I felt like I wasn't entirely real anymore, like something had marked me. Maybe I should have left sooner. Maybe I should have never come back. But I know one thing now. Some people say the ocean calls to them. Me, she did, and the call never ends.
I'd been crashing at an old coworker's guest house 3 towns over. He thought I was going through a breakdown, which, to be fair, I might have been. I didn't tell him the whole story.
How do you explain that you're being followed by something that smells like seawater and has hollow eyes? But being away from that town didn't help much, because she wasn't the only thing following me. It started with a knock at the door. I was alone that night. My coworker and his wife had gone out of town for the weekend. I was reading in bed when I heard it. 3 soft knocks. Not loud, almost polite. I assumed it was a neighbor, maybe a delivery. I checked the time, 9:42 p.m. When I opened the door, I saw a girl standing there, maybe 12 or 13, wearing a dark hoodie, pale skin. But something was wrong with her eyes. They were completely black. Not like dark brown or shadowed. I mean entirely black. No whites, no irises. Just voids. She didn't speak, just stood there and looked up at me with those alien, bottomless eyes. I slammed the door. I know what I saw. It wasn't a costume. It wasn't contact lenses. There was no reflection, no glint, just darkness looking back at me. Then came another knock. 3 more. Then silence. I called the police. When the officer arrived, I could tell he thought I was unhinged, but he checked the property anyway. No signs of anyone, no footprints, no strange girl in sight. I slept with a knife under my pillow. The next morning, I found something scratched into the wood just outside the door. Let her in. The letters were uneven, deep, carved with something sharp. I called my coworker, made up a story about needing to leave suddenly, and packed my things. Again.
I drove without a destination. I just needed distance. Every gas station I stopped at, every motel I checked into, I watched for her. That black-eyed girl. The one who knocked, not like a monster, but like a guest. And that made it worse. The polite ones are always the most dangerous. That night, I stopped at a roadside inn near the Oregon border. Old place, half empty. The woman at the front desk didn't even ask for ID. I took a room on the 2nd floor, overlooking the back lot. Around 2 a.m., I woke up gasping for air, like something had been on my chest. The room was pitch black, but I could feel a presence near the window. Not movement, just presence. The air was too still, too heavy. Then I heard it. Knock, knock, knock. Not at the door, at the window. 2nd floor. I reached for the lamp, flicked it on, and turned. She was there, on the other side of the glass, face pressed up against it, lips curled into a smile. Her eyes were just holes. She didn't blink. She didn't move. She just watched me with this knowing look, like she'd already gotten inside me somehow. I screamed, loud enough to wake the whole floor. When I looked again, she was gone. The motel manager swore no one had been outside, no footprints, no damage to the window. But when I went to my car the next morning, I found something on the windshield, a dead bird. Its eyes were missing. And next to it, written in smudged ash or charcoal, 3 words: "You saw her." I don't sleep much anymore. Not because I'm afraid of dreams, but because I'm afraid of what might be awake. I don't know who the girl was, or if she was even human, but I think she's connected to the woman in the fog. Maybe she's part of whatever this thing is, whatever it wants from me. Because ever since I returned to that cursed beach, it's like the world has changed. The edges don't fit anymore. And the guests, they're starting to knock more often.
There was a tremor in my chest that wouldn't stop. I backed away from the thing wearing my voice, my thoughts. Its form flickered,
almost like it couldn't hold itself together, as if reality refused to accept it. And yet, it stood there, grinning. My face, my tone, but its smile was off, like it hadn't quite practiced enough to be human. "You left her," it whispered, sounding exactly like me. "You let her drown." "No," I said, but even my voice sounded foreign now. It tilted its head, mimicking a gesture I often made in photos. I didn't remember doing it, but seeing it reflected like that in something wrong chilled me more than any ghost or monster ever had. "What do you want from me?" I asked. Its grin widened. "I am you." That's when I ran. Back into the forest behind the motel. Branches scratched my face, thorns bit my ankles, but I didn't stop. I ran until I collapsed near a dry creek bed, choking on air and bile. The sky above was bruised purple, the trees towering and ancient. Then I saw it. A carving. Old, barely legible, etched into a half-buried stone. I cleared away the dirt and read, "She returns to blood." It meant nothing to me. Not then. But now, I think it was a warning. That night, I called my mother for the first time in years. She sounded older, tired, like something in her had been chipped away over time. When I told her what I'd been experiencing, she went silent for a long time. Then she said, "You weren't supposed to go back there." "What do you mean?" "Your father's people, his side of the family, they weren't right. They came from that coast, the one you visited. But something happened generations ago. A bargain, I think. A drowning. And ever since, one of us disappears every few decades, always by water, always marked." "Marked?" "You were born with a small birthmark on your back, remember?" I froze. I remembered it. It was shaped like a hook, almost. I'd had it removed when I was 16, a laser procedure. I'd told people it was ugly, but truth was, it made me feel watched. My mother continued, "That mark shows up in every generation. We don't know how to stop it. We just try to run from it." I hung up the phone with my mother and just sat there. Sweat cold on my neck. The motel room felt like it was shrinking. Breathing became hard. I stood up to open the window, but froze. In the mirror across the room, my reflection hadn't moved. I had stood. It hadn't. It sat there, blinking slowly, studying me. Then it smiled. Not a human smile. Its mouth ripped open wider than it should have, black teeth, a tongue like kelp, and in a voice that sounded like my dead cousin, it said, "The blood remembers." I don't remember running. I only remember waking up on the highway shoulder, curled up in the gravel, with a sheriff's cruiser idling next to me. The officer thought I was high. He asked if I'd been using anything. When I said no, he raised an eyebrow. "You one of them Pendleton kids?" he asked. I shook my head. He squinted. "Looks like you. You got the eyes." I didn't respond. I didn't know what he meant. He leaned down. "Your family's old around here. Real old. There's stories about things that live in the fog, things that come out when the bloodline calls. If I were you, I'd get gone." Then he drove off. That night, I stared at myself in the mirror for hours, trying to see what he saw. I thought about my father,
how he drowned when I was 5, how they never found the body, only his clothes on the dock, folded neatly. I thought about my uncle who walked into the ocean one Thanksgiving and was never seen again. I thought about the dreams I'd been having since childhood, of black waves and pale hands beneath the surface, reaching for me. And I remembered something my grandmother once told me in a whisper. We don't belong to the land. The land remembers what was taken. That phrase echoes in my head now, louder than ever. The thing that wore my voice, it hasn't returned, but I hear footsteps at night, always stopping just before the door. I see shadows that linger too long, reflections that twitch when I don't. Something's watching me, waiting. And I'm starting to wonder if this isn't about punishment anymore. Maybe it's inheritance.
I never should have gone back to the farm, but grief does strange things. After my mother passed, I inherited the last piece of family property in Maine, a decaying farmhouse surrounded by fields that hadn't seen crops in years. I had vague memories of visiting as a child, of long grasses and warm summers, but nothing specific, just flickers, whispers. It was only supposed to be a weekend trip, clean up the place, maybe list it. Instead, I found something buried beneath the floorboards, something that made me question everything I believed about my family and what we were hiding. The house was still standing, but barely. Paint peeling, windows cracked, shingles like curling fingers clawing at the sky. I parked by the rusted gate and stood there for a minute, staring at the land. There was a silence to the field I couldn't explain. Not peace, something else. A kind of listening. I ignored it. Inside, the air smelled like mildew and dust. Every step creaked. In the living room, there was a trap door I didn't remember, covered by a torn rug. I only found it because I tripped. The handle was cold and rusted, but I pried it open. It led to a cellar, dirt floor, shelves filled with jars that had long since gone black with decay. And in the far corner, a chest, old, oak, bound in iron. Inside it was a mask, hand-carved, too detailed to be just a child's toy. The face was long, angular, with slits for eyes and grooves along the cheeks. When I picked it up, something whispered, not in my ears, in my bones. I dropped it, but not before I saw the note beneath it. Do not wear it, not unless you want to see. I told myself to leave. I didn't. Instead, I sat in the living room that night, watching the wind move the grass outside, that endless field of nothing. That's when I saw it. Movement, not wind, something rising from the middle of the field. A figure, tall, thin, wearing the same mask I had found. I blinked, and it was gone. My heart pounded. Then I heard a knock at the back door. I froze. Nobody knew I was here. My phone had no signal. The nearest neighbor was a mile down the dirt road. I moved toward the kitchen, slowly, clutching the old iron poker I'd found by the fireplace. The knock came again. Whew! I flung open the door. Nothing. Just darkness and corn stubble. But in the dirt, just outside the door, footprints. Bare, long-toed, leading away from the house. I didn't sleep. I sat with every light on, shaking, clutching that poker like it was a lifeline.
At 3:17 a.m., I heard something in the cellar. Not footsteps, digging. I wanted to believe it was animals, a raccoon maybe, a possum, but when I finally got the nerve to open the trap door and peek down, the chest was open. The mask was gone.
The next morning, the field looked normal. The wind had flattened the grass in strange swirls, but there were no footprints. I told myself it was a dream, a nightmare, born from isolation and grief, but the truth was worse. That afternoon, I found a carving on the old oak door to the cellar, a symbol I'd seen before, etched into a stone near the village church. It looked like a twisted tree, with roots that tangled into claws. Beneath it, a message scratched deep: "The hollow see all." That night I couldn't stay in the house. I drove into town and booked a room at the only inn. When I returned after dark, the farmhouse was lit from within. Candles, windows glowing orange against the black. I crept closer, heart hammering. Inside, shadows moved on the walls, flickering figures danced in the glow. I saw a circle drawn on the floor of the living room, chalk or ash. Inside it, someone knelt. I wanted to call out, but my voice was caught in my throat. Then the figure looked up. It was me, or a version of me, but with hollow eyes and the carved mask on its face. I ran, back to my car. I didn't stop until I was miles away, the farmhouse just a flicker of light in my rearview mirror. Since then, I haven't been back. But sometimes, when the wind blows just right, I hear the whispers from that field, calling me, waiting for me to return. I never thought I'd see that place again. The ocean was both my curse and my salvation. It called me back, not with the crashing waves, but with a silent pull deep in my bones. Like the tide wasn't just water, but blood, memory, and something far older. I arrived just as the sun was dipping below the horizon, painting the sky with bruises. The village was quiet, almost too quiet, as if holding its breath. The fog rolled in early, thick and heavy, swallowing the streets. I walked to the pier where my father disappeared. The boards creaked beneath my feet. The smell of salt and decay was suffocating. And then I saw her, the woman in the fog, standing at the edge of the water, her veil torn, face half buried in shadow. She turned slowly, her eyes empty, black holes fixed on me. "I've been waiting," she whispered. Her voice was the sound of waves breaking on rocks. I wanted to run, but my legs were heavy, like they were made of stone. She raised her hand, and the fog shifted, revealing faces, my ancestors, their eyes hollow, their mouths sealed shut. They whispered warnings I couldn't understand. The woman stepped closer. "You belong to us," she said. "No," I tried to say, "I'm not yours." But the tide was rising, and I could feel it pulling at my feet. The water lapped over the pier, cold and unyielding. Suddenly, the world blurred. I was underwater. The woman's face was everywhere, inside my mind, wrapped around my heartbeat. I screamed, but the ocean swallowed me whole. I woke up on the shore hours later, alone, but changed. The birthmark was burning, and in the sand a new carving.
The last tide comes for all blood. I don't know what happens next. Maybe the curse ends with me, or maybe it's just beginning. All I know is this: the ocean never forgets, and neither does she.